Happy February, everyone. Welcome back to The Dark Room, where two blind cinephiles illuminate the sighted. I'm Lee Pugsley.
I'm Alex Howard.
And this is a podcast hosted by two legally blind guys for film lovers of all abilities. And today, we have a really fun show planned for you. Alex, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, so I went to Sundance with my friend Jamie. So Jamie is on with us today.
Hello, and thanks for having me again. It's been a wild year. Excited to be in 2024 and to talk Sundance with you both.
And Jamie was my companion at Sundance. So for today's episode, we are doing the blind Sundance experience. So I was lucky enough this year to go to Sundance. We're going to be talking about how it differs from other film festivals, the transportation situation, but then also we're going to talk about the films that Jamie and I saw at the festival, and then one film that Lee and I watched together virtually.
We should say that we're going to discuss these films, but not go into spoilers. Nothing more than a logline or trailer already gave away.
To preface, if you don't know what Sundance is an international film festival that takes place in Park City, Utah. This year was the 40th anniversary of the festival, and it's the first big deal film festival of every year. But yeah, so Sundance is known for the bidding war, a lot of networking, it's in the snow. It's a really iconic film festival. It's always been my dream to go to this festival. So I went virtually in 2021, and in 2024, this is my first year going in person. One difference between Sundance and TIFF, which we did a TIFF episode in September, Sundance is much more spread out. TIFF is like 4 theaters, all walking distance from each other. Sundance, you have to take buses. The theaters are not close. So it's a much different feel, much different experience.
That's really exciting, especially that you've been able to go to 2 prolific film festivals within the last couple of months. And I'm really curious to hear about your experience at Sundance, and also to hear about your experience too, Jamie. And thank you so much for joining us to tell us about your experience too.
I'm happy to be back.
How would you guys sum up your Sundance experience?
I felt like for me, I watched more films that I liked at Sundance. I was definitely less tired than I was at TIFF. I think overall the experience of TIFF was a little bit easier because it's just easier to navigate and get around. It's all in one area. It's funny, last year I think I had maybe 3 movies overall the whole year that I gave 4.5 stars on Letterboxd. After Sundance, I already have 3 that have 4.5 stars. So there are quality movies at Sundance. And you really, you're in a community with, like-minded movie nerds, and it's the place to be. All festivals are great, but Sundance has like a certain feel to it. It's awesome. You hear people talking in the lines while you're waiting for movies about what they saw, so you like really get a sense of the buzz of the festival.
Yeah, it's like being at an exclusive movie theater, like at AMC, but a exclusive club of people, and then everybody in town is either skiing or watching movies. So, and you're surrounded by beautiful mountains. There's snow on the ground. It's cold at night. I felt like I was back home in Maine. Overall, it was a really fun experience, and like you said, it was really nice to hear and to discuss with all the people we were on shuttles with and stuff, what we had seen, what they had seen, and what we each thought of those films. And it was really cool to hear other people's experiences on those subjects.
Yeah, that's really, really awesome. I've been to Utah a few times, and it definitely gets really cold over there. Definitely reminds me, as you said, your Maine days, Jamie, it reminds me of my Idaho days of snow and ice and all of that good stuff.
I did want to touch on, there's a tip for my cane that I started using called the Dakota disc that helps in the snow. And at first, it was very cumbersome. I thought it looked weird. But then once you start using it in the snow, you're like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, it glides right through it. So it really helped me get around a lot better.
That's really interesting about the tip of the cane. I haven't heard of that, but I've never had to use my cane in snow, at least that I can recall, because I try to avoid going home when it's snowing. But yeah, I'll have to look into that.
It looks like a little metal detector.
Yeah, people kept coming up to me at the festival and asking if it was a metal detector.
And out of curiosity, was there anything that surprised either of you guys about Sundance? Maybe it was like something that you were expecting that didn't happen, or something that you weren't expecting that did happen?
I think overall, it was definitely, surreal to be there. I've always dreamed about going to Sundance, so it was really cool to actually go. The feeling of just being there in the snow, being there for the buzz of it all and hearing, what's getting bought by who, and just it all really lined up in that way with some of my expectations. It was really, really cool.
I can imagine that the energy there would just be so thrilling. And then going to you, Jamie, what was surprising, if anything, about your Sundance experience?
It's kind of funny because I guess I knew it was in a mountain town, and I just never thought of what that would mean. Like trying to traverse these like icy, snowy streets in the middle of January or late January. It's funny that everybody from LA goes to a small mountain town in the worst time of year to watch movies, and that's really cool. I think it says a lot about the prestige of this festival and how celebrated it is. You know, being here for 40 years and being a staple of, like Alex was saying earlier, the start of the Oscar race for the next year, you know, start of the buzz and all the people buying films. Like the sales are huge, and this is when it starts. And there's always that joke of LA really starts picking back up after Sundance because it's like a long vacation from Christmas and Thanksgiving. So it's like a big party in the mountain town. I love it.
And I can imagine, too, just in addition to how much excitement there is there, it's just great to have so many people that are passionate about film in one place. Whether it's, you know, people that are looking to make business deals or just, you know, random movie fans. I think that it's a really cool bonding experience.
Yeah, not only do you have Sundance taking place there, Slamdance is going on at the same time, which is another festival. It just happens to be at the same time as Sundance in the same town. It's almost like an underground genre festival, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so it's really funny that, like, you know, you got those two festivals going. Some people are going to both, some people are going to one, but pretty much anyone you run into on the street in Park City that week is at a festival of some kind. Or they're skiing. We were on the bus with a lot of skiers and snowboarders, too.
That would definitely track with it being in Utah. So let's go ahead and jump into the movies that you guys saw. I'm curious to know what your slate looked like, what you thought of the movies, and if you think that any of these are going to stay in the awards conversations as we move into the next award season.
So we did 10 movies in 4 days. Which is crazy because I was less exhausted than I was at TIFF, and I think I only watched like 7 or 8 at TIFF. So on day 1, we watched Every Little Thing and The Moo Guy at the Ray Theater, which is the only theater we went to that day. Every Little Thing is a hummingbird documentary about a hummingbird sanctuary in LA. I thought it was really interesting, and it had beautiful visuals. It was definitely like a Sundance movie, like a documentary about hummingbirds, you know, nature. It feels like a very indie documentary, but it was really good, and I like how they tied it into the bigger, like, life questions.
I mean, yeah, it's really cool. It's a great little look into this woman who's been doing this for almost 20 years now in LA and just rescues hummingbirds, and they mix it with this beautiful cinematography, the phantom cameras, so they can get super slow motion, high detailed shots of these hummingbirds, and like there are a few hummingbirds you follow over the course of the film, like, you know, as she's rehabilitating them. If there's, you know, you kind of follow their progress, if they pass, if they survive, and like she has like a recovery stage, like different phases of recovery. Like she has like little cages, and then she has like a flight cage to try to test the flight with the bird, and then finally she has an outdoor sanctuary where it's just like the final step before she lets them out. And it was just such a beautiful moving piece that mixes her work with her personal life, and it's really touching. It's nice to see a movie in Utah about our home, LA, which is really cool. And I was like, oh man, that's my home.
So at Sundance, what's really cool about film festivals is a lot of times there are Q&As after with the filmmakers. We had a Q&A for Every Little Thing. The director was there, the subject was there, no hummingbirds, but the woman who saves the hummingbirds was there.
Terry.
That's one of the coolest things about festivals, honestly, is the Q&A part of it all.
Not every film had a Q&A. I think we were fortunate enough to have at least, 7 or 8 out of all of them. There was only a couple we didn't get. Then we watched this kind of horror thriller called The Moo Guy from New Zealand. It's about this horrific thing that happened in real life. It's in probably the 60s or 50s. In New Zealand, they would steal Aboriginal children from their families in the woods, bring them to white houses, almost like to dilute the population to make everybody more white over time. So they take the youth, so the old people die out and they're slowly losing their heritage. And it's really crazy to think about. So they took that premise and made a horror out of it. And it was really cool. Like I thought it was a really fun idea. The character, so it's like a typical gaslighting thriller, right? So she's fearful of this creature called the Mugai and coming to take her kids, and her husband doesn't believe her, and then all that kind of stuff. She starts being called crazy, but it's a weird shift where normally you believe and want to see that woman succeed, or that person who's being gaslit succeed. But she was such an asshole as a character. It was really hard to root for her in the movie, even though that's what you're supposed to do, right? Like, you're supposed to want her to finally prove it to her husband, like, yeah, this is really happening. But it had some pretty funny humor in it, and it had some pretty shocking moments. I don't want to spoil, but there was one point where everybody gasped in unison. It was like insane.
It was definitely fun. I think it didn't hit me as hard as I was hoping. It was a little bit by the book. It felt a little like Blumhousey, if that makes sense. It had a little like Invisible Man feel to it, which I loved the Invisible Man in 2020. This one wasn't as good as that, but it was still interesting enough, and like the whole indigenous angle made it very unique. So like there was nothing bad we saw at Sundance for sure. This was probably on the lower end of things, but every film that we saw had something to admire about it, which is another great thing about Sundance, because you know, even if you don't necessarily like a movie, it's not going to be like a waste of time.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the great things too about Sundance or any film festival is it does give you the opportunity to have exposure to films that maybe you would miss otherwise if you weren't at a film festival to be able to see them. Because if they don't find a distributor, or they don't get a wide release, or they're only in theaters for a few days, or, so many different factors could affect your ability to see some of these great films that you guys were able to see.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I think one more thing about Mugai, the creature effects were really cool, too.
Yeah. Actually, I have another thing, too. Is in the Q&A, they had the lead 3 actors there, but the director wasn't there. And apparently the 2 actors who are the leads were indigenous and had not seen the film before this screening. And these 2 were the world premiere, by the way. Every Little Thing and Mugai were the world premiere, the first time anyone saw them ever. And so they were there, and like it's a horrific story for their people to have to witness on screen, and they had no foresight beforehand, which is crazy. Like, they were just still trying to process it. They were like kind of shaken up after in the Q&A. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, and there was someone else who was indigenous in the audience that said it really affected them. So it's nice to see that like the movie hit the people it was trying to hit in the right way.
But it was wide enough where a lot of people could enjoy it, and it was really well done.
Day 2, we watched 3 movies. The first one we saw was Good One, which I think Lee would really like this one, because it's a very intimate movie about a daughter going on a hike with her dad and her dad's best friend, and their conversations, obviously there are things that come up that they disagree with, all that kind of stuff. But it's definitely an intimate movie with a small setting, and it's gorgeous with all the nature shots, but their conversation at some points really hits home. It's really good.
It sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, it's a nice little independent film where it's just a character study. You learn a lot about them and their personalities, and talk about their past. And the dad's best friend, the son was supposed to come with them, and then they had a fight and he didn't come. So it was just the 3 of them. And then he's talking about his divorce. Like, there's really good stuff there. It's a really good character study. And the performances were all fantastic. Like, the 3 leads were exceptional. That was my favorite film at that point. And I was like, this is not going to change. But then that changed very quickly. So.
And I think they said the girl, they just found her. Like, wasn't she the daughter, like the friend of the director's daughter or something?
I think so. She was an actor, but she didn't really have anything of note yet. So yeah, it was really cool that this is her big break, hopefully.
Oh, a lot of times, another thing that's cool about Sundance is a lot of times this is the filmmakers or actors' big break. Like, a lot of filmmakers started at Sundance. I think Richard Linklater did with Dazed and Confused, and there's Ryan Coogler with Fruitvale Station. There's so many directors that like got their start from the Sundance Film Festival. So it's cool to like just be there and like feel the history of it all too. What did we watch? We watched so many movies. What did we watch second that day, Jamie?
Desire Lines at the Egyptian. That was our only time at the Egyptian, which a beautiful theater.
Yeah, Egyptian is the only theater on Main Street at Sundance, that was really surprising to me, because I thought Main Street was going to be like TIFF, where there's like 3 or 4 theaters. Everyone hangs out there, which if you go there just during the day at Sundance, it's mostly people are chilling, hanging out there. But like they had a Napoleon Dynamite truck because it was the 20th anniversary of Napoleon Dynamite. They were handing out tots and things like that. They had
Napoleon Flash Mob.
yeah, they had the merch store. A lot of things going on Main Street. But yeah, the Egyptian's the only actual theater there. But shout out to Matt Lauterbach for producing the audio description track for Desire Lines. So Desire Lines is I guess it's a narrative, but basically he's blending the line between documentary and fiction. So it's about
A female to male trans person. It's interesting because it's like a time travel in a way. That's how it was like presented in the description. But it's like this guy is in a future researching. Well, he's in like 2020, but it's a little more futuristic. But they're researching the female to male trans community, and then they intercut that with the doc part of it where they're interviewing a lot of FTM males and how, like, you know, how their sexual attraction started, and like they were like, for sure, before they transitioned, they were interested in women. They were talking about like turning like gay, and it was an interesting like juxtaposition of the doc and the narrative function. Some really laugh out loud moments and really fun conversations when the doc part. I like the doc part more than the narrative, actually, in my end. But
definitely the audio description track is great. I think it doesn't hold back from being adult. I think that's one of my that's been a lot of my criticisms of description, is they kind of try and play it down for like PG, but like no, Matt did a great job of making sure that it was as adult as the movie was. And something that really stuck with me from the Q&A that the director said was, as we push the boundaries of gender, we have to push the boundaries of genre. So I thought that was really interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, that is a really fascinating way to do a film, and unique choice to kind of blend documentary with narrative. I'll be curious to check that out when it becomes more widely available.
So then we went to my favorite film of the festival, Love Lies Bleeding, which was in Salt Lake City. So they do screenings in Park City, which is the main Sundance Film Festival, and then they'll do screenings in Salt Lake City too for some of the movies, because I think that's where most of the Utah population is. So we went down to Salt Lake to see Love Lies Bleeding, which comes out March 8th. It's from A24, starring Kristen Stewart, Ed Harris, Dave Franco, and who's the female co-lead?
Katie O'Brien.
I love this movie. This is totally right up my alley. It's a romantic crime thriller, almost like Fargo, where it like spirals out of control. Ed Harris plays almost like a Nick Cage character. He's crazy. It is so good. And I don't want to say too much. I can't wait for people to see this movie. I can't wait to go see it again on March 8th. It's from the director of Saint Maud, which I haven't seen. Lee, have you seen it?
No, I've wanted to see that movie. I still need to check that out. It was on my list when I first heard about Saint Maud. So that's exciting to know that it's the same director.
Yeah, and the audio description is also great for this movie, obviously, since it already had distribution by A24. I think it was Deluxe that did the description. If I remember right, Laura Post was the one who voiced it. But no, this is an outstanding film, and I cannot wait.
I should note that I've heard it's very different in tone from Saint Maud, so that might not be a good indicator. As long as you trust the director's process, you should be okay. But it's not the same tone I've heard. It's completely different. Because this is like an unraveling string, like it just keeps going, and it's like, how can this ever resolve? Like, it's such a edgier seat, fun thriller, and it's so gory. It is insanely gory. Just a heads up for anyone who doesn't like gore. But it is a really fun time. And there's really gasp moments too there in that film, which I don't want to spoil, but I can't wait to talk about them.
And there are funny moments too.
Yeah, very much.
And I was telling a friend about this the other day. Like, there are certain movies that almost give you like a high. It's almost like we keep going to the movies. That's why we love it so much, because we want to get that like that high. There were at least 3 or 4 movies at Sundance where I got that like, oh my God, this is so good, I don't want it to end, that like high feeling. And Love Lies, I think, was the first one that gave me that, and it started off with a string of them. That was our end of day 2. So we ended day 2 on a high for sure.
And then we started day 3 with my favorite movie of the festival, Thelma. And so Thelma is a very low stakes action movie. It's made with this 93-year-old lead, but played by June Squibb, in her first starring role ever, I think. And she is this, this loving grandma. Her kids are kind of like a little worried about her all the time. Her grandson is always worried about her. Like, she's living by herself in her own house. So she gets a call from who she thinks is her grandson. And it's, unfortunately, the truth now. There are people who will use AI or a similar voiced person to make him think that is their grandson. So he's asking for money to bail out of jail, $10,000. She sends it out, and the cops won't do anything, so she takes matters into her own hands to find the money herself, and she goes on this wild adventure in LA, and it's a fun time. It is scored, and it is shot like a Mission Impossible movie. So, like, it's intense action, and it's a very low, like, she's rolling off the bed. Like, it's like treacherous for somebody that age to do these kinds of things. So it's really funny that it takes that gravitas of a higher paced action movie like Mission Impossible and puts it in an old lady's story. And it's really fun. Clark Gregg, Parker Posey, Richard Roundtree in one of his final roles before he passed. And to me, the standout besides June Squibb, of course, is Fred Heichinger, the grandson. You might have seen him in like the first season of White Lotus, I think, but he's phenomenal too. He's really good, and he's like kind of stuck in his life, and he's like, how can I be stuck? I'm only like 22 or whatever. So, and it's a really cute little relationship between him and his grandmother. And Malcolm McDowell. But highly recommend it. Do you know if it's coming out? Is it picked up or anything yet?
I don't know if it was picked up or not. I think it will be, because there's a lot of buzz around that. So we saw this movie at the Eccles Theater, which is the biggest theater at Sundance. It's the venue everyone wants to play at because it's thousands of seats. It's a high school auditorium. And so since I had my cane, we got to sit like in the front row of the Eccles. It was so cool. And so for the Q&A, we were like right there. Jamie got to talk to...
I recorded the Q&A. I put it up on YouTube. I'll have to put it in the show notes.
Yeah, so if you want to see the Q&A for Thelma, check out Jamie's YouTube channel.
I think there are minor spoilers in there, just so you know.
But no, this movie is a lot of fun. I think this is one that Lee will like as well. It's very, it's like an action spoof with old people. It's very charming, for sure.
I also appreciate the fact that it's like a refreshing take on the action genre, because usually you think about just like, these, young or middle-aged men or these like, kick-ass women, but once again, not people that are, in the senior citizen or elderly category. And so I think that's a really unique and fresh take on that genre that I'll be very excited to see. And I really like June Squibb a lot, and it's great to see that she's finally getting a starring role in something.
Yeah, and it's nice. The director was saying it's kind of, obviously it's not based on a true story, but
she was scammed this exact way. She didn't send the money, but so they caught her in time before she actually put it in the post office. But he kind of pictured like what would happen if with his real grandmother is named Thelma, and it's kind of based on her personality, and she's still alive. She's like 103 now. So she got to see the movie, which is really cool. But like he just takes what grandmother's personality would do in this situation, and she would go after and get her money back, and it's really fun.
I think that was the best audience we saw a movie with, because there were so many people, and it was I think comedies are such an atmospheric experience to watch in a theater. So I feel like that was the best audience atmosphere that we saw. Would you agree, Jamie?
Oh, absolutely. All the laughs hit where they're supposed to. Everybody was, having a great time. It had that high you were talking about earlier for me. It was just like, that's the movie I didn't know I needed to see, but I'm glad I did.
And for that one, we actually have a friend at Sundance that I met through, he's a friend of a friend, Skip. If you're listening to this, thank you for driving us around Sundance. But yeah, he gave us a little tour of everything and went to the movie with us. It was really great to have a contact who actually lives in Park City.
Yeah.
That's great. It's always helpful when you're in an unfamiliar area and you have someone that knows the area and can show you the ropes a little bit.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so then our second one that day is another one that I think Lee will really like. This was one of my favorite movies at the festival. It's called Hitman, directed by Richard Linklater. So this premiered at Venice last year. Then it was at TIFF, and I didn't get to see it at TIFF. And then it was at Sundance, so I finally got to see it at Sundance. It was acquired by Netflix at Venice. So they've still been doing the festival circuit even though they bought it. But Liz Gutman wrote the AD tracks. Thank you, Liz Gutman. The AD track was great. It's so good. I was telling Jamie literally before we walked in, I was like, how is Richard Linklater going to do an action movie? He did Bernie, he did the Before trilogy, he did Dazed and Confused, but I'm like, those movies do not like scream action. And oh my god, like this is exactly what you would imagine it to be, like a very personal, grounded action movie. It's about a hitman who basically he poses as a hitman and arrests people who try and hire him. So he's working for the police. So it's a
Sting operation.
yeah, it's a sting operation, and it's fascinating because obviously it's a crime thriller, spirals out of control. But like Glenn Powell is so good in this movie, and he models his hitman after whoever is hiring him. So he embodies a character of who he thinks they would want as their hitman. He's so good in this movie. I would love for him to get a Best Actor nomination. I don't know that that's gonna happen. Maybe an Indie Spirit Award nomination, but he also co-wrote this with Richard Linklater.
He gets to play around a lot too. Like he has different like characters he plays, and he plays them really well. His initial character Gary is really meek, and then he drops that facade when he becomes these other people. And I wouldn't say it's an action. It's definitely a crime thriller in a fun way. It's a phenomenal performance from Glenn Powell, and I really was delighted with that film. It was really fun to watch.
Yeah, Richard Linklater is one of my favorite directors. He was not there. I was so sad. I was hoping he would be there, but it's okay. I got to see the movie, so that's fine. But yeah, watch out for Hitman on Netflix, because that's definitely one of my faves. And I'm excited to see what Lee thinks of that one. I can't even remember what we saw after that one, our third one that day.
I saw the TV Glow.
That's right. This was one of the weirdest movies we saw at the festival. It's called I Saw the TV Glow. It's with Justice Smith from Detective Pikachu.
Yeah. And Bridget Lindy Payne. They played the daughter in Bill and Ted Face the Music.
I'm going to let Jamie talk about that. Because, okay, all I have to say about this one is the visuals are beautiful. The story is really weird. I think I like the first half better than the second half. Like I said, there were no bad movies we saw. But I don't know that I need to watch this one again. It was interesting. But I think it hit Jamie really... It sat with him really well. So I'll let Jamie talk about this one.
You know, at first I was kind of upset of how it ended. Like, I feel like there was no character growth. And I think it was more of a subtle growth than I expected. But yeah, I came in with high expectations of this one because the description talked about... So basically, these two like kind of outcasts become friends in high school and start watching this show that is pretty much based off of Are You Afraid of the Dark? But they have a monster of the week, which is kind of like Power Rangers-ish. And there's like an overlord they have to get to. It's like a psychic battle with this moon demon or whatever. So, but it's very much like the cheesy Are You Afraid of the Darks from the 90s. They're kind of parodying. And they both love the show. And then you kind of jump in time around a little bit. You see them in the future when they're a little older. You know, they kind of have a falling out. And then it's a really interesting premise. Beautifully shot. The visuals, the colors are so nice.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Lots of reds and blues.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to go into spoilers, but I took something from it. And then we talked to a person. Another great thing about Sundance, we talked to somebody on the shuttle, waiting for the shuttle.
She was a volunteer at the festival.
Yeah, and she was there when she was there the last time, and it was more about like hiding who you are like as a queer person. And I was like, oh, I didn't totally get that at all. And so now I really want to watch it again to see what I pick up on knowing that. I don't know if that's supposed to be public knowledge, but she said it in the Q&A. But I looked at it more of like creativity and kind of being stuck, because that's what I get out of that stuff as a cis white male.
Yeah, I think you and I were more looking at it from a career standpoint, but hearing that really opened our eyes to it more. But yeah, I mean, if you're into more artsy movies, definitely check this one out. It's not for everyone, but it's certainly an interesting movie.
Mm-hmm.
With the way that you guys have been talking about this movie, even before we started recording this, it makes me incredibly intrigued. Whether or not I like this movie is jury's still out on that one, but I'm really intrigued to watch this movie now.
And I think this was Bleecker Street, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so it should be at the Burbank 6 or 8. It should get a small theatrical distribution, I would think. So that was our end of day 3. Our last day 4, we watched 2 movies, both of which I really liked.
Yeah.
The first one was Skywalker's A Love Story. Ironically, I wore my Star Wars shirt on this day, even though Skywalker's is not a Star Wars movie. Skywalker's is a documentary about a couple they're roof-toppers. So their whole thing, they break into skyscrapers around the world, and they're not stealing anything. Their whole goal is to just get to the very top of the spire and take a picture for social media. And so I guess this is kind of like an extreme sport people do, especially if you're like acrobatic and things like that. So the woman is a former gymnast
whose parents were in the circus. So she grew up in that kind of acrobatic lifestyle.
Yeah. And so she meets this other guy who was also a rooftopper, and obviously they start falling in love, but it's all like in the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine war too. And just like the shots in this movie are incredible, like on top of these skyscrapers. And I'm kind of bummed that Netflix bought it because that means most people are going to watch it on their TV.
Yeah.
I want to go to the Egyptian, the theater that Netflix owns, to rewatch this. Because I would say try and see it on the biggest screen possible because, oh my God, like, there are moments where I felt a little nauseous because you feel so high up. But it is so good. And, like, it's almost like a thriller of a documentary, I would say, because it's so intense. There are parts of it where you're like, you think you know where it's going, but you don't. It almost becomes like a heist movie at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Because they use, like, the heist movie aesthetics and score and the graph of them trying to climb this building, this new skyscraper.
One of the coolest things that they said at the Q&A was, so the guy... Basically, when he goes up there with his girlfriend, they want to do like an acrobatic pose. So a lot of the time he'll be holding her, or, do something crazy on the top where you're like, oh my God, I would freak out. But at the same time as holding her up, he has to fly the drone because the crew doesn't go up to the top with them because it's too dangerous.
They shoot all their own footage.
It is crazy. I'm like, he's holding her and flying the drone at the same time. It is so impressive. This was definitely my top 3 of the festival. This is another 4.5 star for me. I absolutely love this movie.
Yeah, hopefully if it comes out in theaters, even for a week, Netflix usually does like a very short run. Try to watch it in IMAX if you can. Yeah. Oh man, you need to watch it in the biggest screen possible.
So one of the best things about this documentary is I love it when you come out of a movie and people are saying, oh, I need to watch more documentaries. That's what you want from this movie. And that's definitely how you feel. You're like, oh, I want to find more movies like this.
Nice. I'll have to catch it before it hits Netflix. Hopefully, like you were saying, Alex, at the Egyptian theater. And I always love good documentaries, and I really appreciate the fact that documentaries are starting to get more recognition and more widespread attention throughout the past few years. And I would love to see that trend continue. And it sounds like with a movie like this, that helps push documentaries forward as well.
Yeah, I think the volcano one from a few years ago, Fire of Love, that made my top 10. I actually think I like this one better than Fire of Love.
It's a very similar premise, right? Like you follow this couple who's doing something very dangerous, and they were doing it for geological research, and this is for social media fame, but it's still like the love story is the center of the film, and then you follow them as they try to accomplish this massive goal, and it's really cool. It's a different style, though. It definitely feels more intense, like a normal narrative movie because of all the stakes, because of the POV shots where you're looking over the edge, like, oh God, I was like, oh no, I'm gonna stop eating this popcorn right now because I was getting queasy. You don't know if you're afraid of heights until you see something like that.
Oh, I knew I was afraid of heights, but I think that's an eyesight thing.
It kind of reminds me of some of the shots in Free Solo.
Yeah.
The documentary that came out a while at like 2018 or maybe it was 2017, somewhere around there. But just some of those shots, were really intense and could easily make anyone afraid of heights.
I still haven't seen that one. It's been on my list forever, and I regret not seeing it on the big screen.
It's on Disney Plus. You watch it there with AD.
Yeah. One other thing about Skywalkers, I thought it was interesting that it's all in Russian. That's what the subjects speak. But they do voiceovers in English. And someone asked him a question like, how did they know English? And he said, no, he taught them how to say those lines in English. They were from interviews that he took before, and he just had them say it again. And he had them do it in English so that it would appeal to more audiences if it were in English as well. So I thought that was really interesting that he knew that it would reach a wider audience if it wasn't just in Russian.
Yeah, that was a good idea because their story of the love between them is such a relatable thing.
That was a great audience too because it was such an intense movie. I feel like the audience was like on a ride with us. It was crazy.
Yeah. Speaking of wild rides.
Yeah, dude, oh my gosh. So our last movie we saw was called Sasquatch Sunset. So I went into this movie with low expectations because someone had messaged me and told me to skip this one. And he said there's no dialogue. And I was like, well, if there's no dialogue, the audio description is going to be great. Boy, was I right. This is such a fun movie. This is like, it's definitely not for everyone. I honestly don't know how Lee is going to feel about this one. But it's about a family, a year in the life of a family of Sasquatches. There's zero dialogue. Jesse Eisenberg and Riley Keough play Sasquatches, full makeup. You never know it's them until the credits roll. It is so funny. It's hilarious. Like, they have so many stereotypes of, like, the drunk husband, there's so many things, like, in our lives that we can relate to this movie and things that the Sasquatches do. It is so funny. I can't remember the last time I laughed that hard in a theater. And honestly, I think the audio description helps my enjoyment because of the way they were describing things. And just, I was laughing so hard at like the description. And I'm like, I wish we could play this movie with open description at AMC and urge people to go. Because I think this is the perfect movie to point to be like, oh, you don't know what audio description is? Go watch Sasquatch Sunset and you'll see what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I didn't know anything about the Sasquatch part of it. I thought it was just like a name, like an artsy name. I knew it was a Jesse Eisenberg movie. But the description says you follow a family in the woods in a year of their life. Like it's like you're watching a nature doc of this family with no narration. And it's like you're going to laugh like if you love the early 2000s like raunchy comedies. Like that's the kind of vibe I got out of watching this and laughing very hard at like, you know, fart jokes and stuff like that. Like that's why some people might be turned off by it, but I think it was really funny and well done. And the prosthetics were amazing. I really couldn't tell which one was Jesse or Riley until I look at their eyes. I'm like, I think that's her.
But yes, I would love for this to be best makeup next year at the Oscars for Sasquatch Sunset. That would be amazing.
So look out for this one. It's really fun. Like I said, if you like kind of more of a raunchy humor, or if you just like nature docs, it's a really fascinating approach to a film. And a lot of those films that don't have dialogue, some can be turned off. Like if it's like an intentional art choice, but it works so well here and it makes sense that I highly recommend it.
And for everyone listening to this, I urge you to watch this with audio description because it is so funny.
I'm not going to lie, when you were first telling me about this movie, Alex, and that it's about a family of Sasquatches and there's no dialogue and they're played by these actors, I'm just like, this sounds absolutely ridiculous. And to a certain degree, I'm sure it is ridiculous, but I think it's to the point now where it sounds so ridiculous to me, having no context for it, other than what you guys have talked about here, that my interest is highly piqued now, and I will eagerly be anticipating this movie.
So then the last one, Lee and I watched together. So Lee, do you want to give your thoughts on A Real Pain before I give mine?
This is part of the virtual Sundance experience, and Alex and I watched A Real Pain with Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin. So Jesse Eisenberg wrote and directed this film, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really fun screenplay. There's a lot of like banter back and forth. There's a lot of fun character dynamics, some really good humor. I thought that both Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin did a really great job. They play cousins, and I thought that they had really good chemistry with each other, and I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I think that it could have possibility to be in the best screenplay category next year, but, you know, it's still early this year, so we'll see what else comes out. But I think it's a very well-written, very well-directed, and very well-acted movie with a lot of fun and a lot of heart, too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I think it's probably my fourth or fifth favorite from Sundance just because I had so much fun with the other ones. This one was a lot more serious, but it also had some fun moments too. Fox Searchlight acquired it for $10 million. I think they are probably going to put it out November-ish for Oscars for next year. I think they're hoping for a screenplay nom. I think they're hoping for Kieran Culkin to get nominated. He kind of plays the same character he does in Succession, but he's so good at like that snarky, lovable asshole kind of character that you're like, I could watch you play this all my life. It's great. He has so many like those snarky jokes where you're like, oh man, like it was so mean, but you're like, I don't want that to stop. But it's about these two cousins that go to Poland and to visit a concentration camp. So it is a rather serious movie, but it's definitely it's interesting to see their relationship and dynamic in the backdrop of World War II.
And I think it handles the subject with a nice balance of humor so it doesn't feel overly heavy while still understanding what this subject matter is and how to address certain components and certain things that go along with that subject matter too.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, this one was very good, so I do recommend checking this out when it comes out later this year. I'm sure we will be talking about it down the line when it does come out into theaters. And but overall, like, obviously I didn't see any other blind people at Sundance. Jamie, did you?
No.
So I'm hoping as the years go on, we can have more blind representation at these big festivals. I think that will benefit everyone. to have that happen. But yeah, no, Sundance was so much fun. I'm really hoping this isn't my last time going.
On that note, in terms of accessibility for this festival, I know that we touched on accessibility for TIFF as well. How accessible was this festival for you in whatever aspects you might want to touch on?
I don't think Sundance was as accessible as TIFF. I think mostly because of the transportation side of things, getting around Sundance is a lot harder, which is why I had Jamie with me. Just the snow and ice, but then, taking the buses everywhere, all of that. But I do think there are ways that it can be done, and I think it is definitely an experience, and, hopefully we can get things easier at some point. But in terms of audio description, there were some great audio description tracks. There were some just okay ones. I think just like every other festival, there aren't as many options of audio described movies as movies that don't have audio description. Like when you're picking your tickets, just like at TIFF, if you don't get the ones that you want, you're kind of SOL because, these are the only movies you can pick from. So I think there's still a long way to go for the festival system to become accessible. I mean, overall, I think the staff at Sundance are very accommodating. I think the accessibility branch of Sundance is trying their absolute best, and they did a great job, actually. There was one time we went to a theater, the device wasn't working, and the next time we went to that theater, they had different devices for me ready to go. So, the accessibility at Sundance, the team that works in accessibility is outstanding. They are really trying to make this festival be as accessible as they can and try and break new ground in terms of accessibility and being super accommodating with everything. So I think everyone at all of these festivals, especially Sundance, are trying so hard. And I think all I can do is say thank you. And we're all learning to see how we can make things better.
It's definitely a team effort, and it sounds like, there's steps in the right direction for sure. And just wanted to check in with you too, Jamie. As someone who is fully sighted, but who was with Alex, if you had any additional thoughts about accessibility at this festival.
I guess it's more of just getting around and not trying. It's hard to traverse these sometimes icy, sometimes snowy areas. And a lot of times they close off the roads for certain events and stuff, especially in Main Street. So you have to walk around it, and usually you have to walk through snow. Like the first night we were there, we walked through a bunch of snow because everything's kind of spread out. There's a lot of space in Utah, especially outer parts of Park City or surrounding areas. So stores are really hard to get to because you have to walk. There's no walkways, and if the walkways are there, sometimes they're not fully plowed or shoveled. So it gets to be a little cumbersome. But luckily enough, we were close to a shuttle route, so that helped us most of the time. And then when we couldn't do that, that's another thing too. I wish we'd had more shuttles that were later. There were some times the movie got done so late, there was one every 30, 40 minutes of the route we needed. They skipped every other one because they didn't have enough drivers. If they had those available to us, especially knowing these movies are playing this late, that would be more helpful.
I think also the theater staff and volunteers, everyone is so passionate about movies, and everyone's trying to make everyone's experience amazing. And especially at Rose Wagner, the Ray, Redstone, it's just these people care so much about making your experience great, not just at the festival, but a great movie experience, because they all love movies. And so whenever I'm getting the audio description devices and things, they're all trying so hard to make sure it works and I can enjoy it as much as everyone else can. And I really appreciate all of that.
Yeah, shout out to Brian at the Ray who helped us perfect the audio description there over our 4 films there. And then Grubby at Redstone helped a lot. That was the one that he got a new device the next day we went. That was really awesome. He got it shipped over just for you. Yeah.
So Grubby volunteers at TIFF, volunteers at Sundance, is from Chicago and works at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. I'm how do you do this? But no, it was overall a very, very awesome experience. Literally a dream come true. It was so cool. But yeah, I definitely recommend, if you haven't been to a film festival, go to the theater in general. Obviously, we preach that all the time. Go to the movie theater. I know it's a pain in the ass, especially if you need audio description, but they're only going to learn and get better. But I love the theatrical experience, the festival experience, movies in general, but just this communal thing that you feel when you're at a festival or at a theater is amazing.
Yeah, I agree with that. There is nothing like the communal experience of watching a movie with a whole crowd of other people and sharing those moments together, whether it's laughter, tears, shock, fear, any of it. It's all just so wonderful. And yeah, thank you guys so much for recapping your Sundance experience and educating me on movies that I would have never known existed if it weren't for both of you guys. And Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, thanks for going to Sundance with me.
Oh yeah, that was awesome. I mean, you didn't have to twist my arm that much.
And thank you so much to Matt Lauterbach for making that awesome audio description track on Desire Lines, but also doing the transcriptions for these episodes. So Matt Lauterbach and All Senses Go, thank you so much. I'd really like to thank Sundance and Descriptive Video Works for helping me get over there for my first time in person. And I'd also like to shout out Ashley Eakin, who was on our show and who we ran into at Sundance because she had a film at Slamdance.
And we met our mutual friend Corey Reeder there. That was really fun to see. He was at Slamdance as well.
We also met Nick Novicki, who was in charge of the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, and he announces it every year at Sundance. So we got to meet him and talk to him about that.
And it's a buddy comedy, and it's sign-ups are up until April 1st, so if you want to sign up, please do. And it's from April 2nd to the 7th, 5 days to make a film. So if you're interested, as long as you have any person with disabilities on the crew or in front of the camera, you could be eligible for a buddy comedy. So look into it.
And for those of you out there who are listening, if you have been to Sundance or any other film festival and you want to dialogue with us about your experience, feel free to email us at darkroomfilmcast@gmail.com. And speaking of engaging in conversation, we recently got an email from Brett. And Brett, we just want to shout you out and thank you so much for contacting us. Brett is an audio describer, and he was just talking about what he's learned from the podcast episodes we've done with some of the audio describers we've had on. Anything that you guys want to dialogue about, once again, feel free to reach out at any time. We love to hear from you.
It meant a lot hearing from Brett, him saying that we get into the nuts and bolts of audio description. It always feels really good to hear from anyone, but especially in reference to something that we are so passionate about. So thank you so much for reaching out, and we hope to hear from some of you other listeners as well at some point.
And you can also follow us on Instagram at Darkroom Filmcast. Once again, that's at Darkroom Filmcast. And Jamie, where can people find you?
You can follow me everywhere at Guy on a Wire. That's like Man on a Wire. Guy on a Wire on Instagram and YouTube and everything. I make horror shorts that are on my YouTube page. I don't post much on Instagram, but if you want to follow me, go ahead and drop a line and watch my shorts if you can.
Yeah, Jamie's shorts are really good, everyone, so please check them out. They're awesome. And thank you so much for joining us today.
And we will, I'm sure, be talking about award season and other things coming up in the very near future.
Have a good day.